As of now, you're no longer with this company. Figure out how to get home yourself. I didn't blink. I read it again and again, just to be sure I wasn't imagining the cruelty tucked into so few words. No call, no explanation, no flight home, just an email at 10:21 p.m. I clicked reply. Thank you for letting me know. Then I closed the laptop like I was sealing a door. My name is Mary Witt. I'm 37. I have a daughter back in Savannah and a suitcase half unpacked in a hotel I didn't choose. And now I don't have a job. Another buzz from my phone. Corporate card terminated. Effective immediately. So that was it. 3 weeks of fixing a contract they couldn't handle, and now I was disposable. I reached for the printed draft in my bag. 8 pages. My draft, my terms, my clause. Line 42, Section 7. All revisions and execution must be routed through L. Wheatlow. They signed that. Elliot never read the fine print. I always did. Footsteps approached from the front desk. Miss Whitlow, is everything all right? The night manager stood a few steps away, trying not to intrude. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder, just figuring out travel plans. He gave a courteous nod, then stepped away, no further questions. I didn't tell him I had $48 to my name, or that I wasn't sure if I could get back in time for Ivy's school presentation. Instead, I stayed right there on the lobby bench, running my thumb over the contract's corner like it could reassure me. They thought I'd fold. They forgot who wrote the deal they're about to lose. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at RevengeAITA. It's based on stories of quiet professionals who are often overlooked until the moment their absence becomes a company's collapse. We write this for every woman who was called replaceable. You are never that. You're seriously going to leave during her birthday week. Priya stood in the doorway holding Ivy's backpack with one hand and her patience with the other. She has a presentation on Thursday. She's 7. She's going to remember. I know. My voice barely made it out. They're threatening to pull the Raya's contract. If I don't go, it falls apart. And if you do go, she dropped the bag by the door. What do you get? A thank you. I looked at the counter where Evie's school project lay unfinished. Cut up felt glue stains, construction paper shaped like a leather handbag. I had promised to help her decorate it. That was before Elliot Grayson called me into his office with a smirk and a flight itinerary. It's 1 week, I told Priya. That's what you said last time. You were gone for 10 days. She waited by the window every afternoon. I didn't respond. There wasn't a good answer. Ivy came running down the hall with mismatched socks and pigtails. Mommy, I want to show you my dance weight. Are you already packing? Her eyes went straight to the open suitcase. It's just for a few days, baby. You said that on Christmas. She wrapped her arms around my waist so tight I could barely breathe. I'll call every night. Aunt Priya is staying with you and you love her. Her voice cracked. But it's my birthday soon. I'll be home in time. I promise. I made that promise because I needed to believe it, because the deal I was flying across the world to save would bring in over $10 million in product over the next 2 years. Because Grayson and Hall had no one else who could talk to Raya's Leatherworks and not offend them in the first 5 minutes because they made me believe I mattered, and because if I didn't go, they would replace me. Eduardo flipped through the final draft slowly, his fingers pausing at the bottom of each page before turning to the next. I sat across from him, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying not to let my nerves show. Is there anything else you need clarified? I asked. He looked up. Only this section here, Clause 7. I leaned forward. Execution authority. He nodded. It says all revisions and final approval must go through you directly. That is correct. Yes, I replied. It's just legal housekeeping. Ensures consistency. Your team deals with me, not a dozen changing faces from our side. Lucia, his wife, joined us with a plate of pastries and a curious glance. Why did they let you add that they didn't read it closely? I admitted they rarely do. Eduardo chuckled softly. Then they deserve what's coming. I froze. He raised an eyebrow. I don't mean it cruelly, but any company that undervalues the person building the bridge has no business crossing it. I didn't know how to respond to that. Have they thanked you? Lucia asked gently. No, I said, not once. Eduardo signed the bottom of the page with deliberate strokes. Then let this be your insurance. If they ever forget who made this happen, this paper will remind them. At the time, it felt symbolic, like a gesture of respect I wasn't used to. I tucked the contract into my bag that evening without thinking twice. Elliot never followed up. He only texted once to say, "Get it signed." Yet, I didn't know then that those 12 words buried on page 6 would become the thread holding everything together. And now, sitting in a foreign hotel with no job and no ticket home, I took out that same copy, unfolded it on my lap, and read Clause 7 again. My name, my condition. Without me, there was no deal. The bus ride to the outskirts of Buenos Aires was quieter than usual. I barely looked out the window. The contract sat in my bag like it weighed more than any suitcase I had ever carried. By the time I reached the Raya's workshop, the sun had started to fall. The gates were still open inside. A few workers were cleaning up leather scraps and locking up equipment. Eduardo looked up from a workbench, eyebrows raised. Mary Lucia appeared behind him. Her hands were still covered in graphite from ledger work. Is something wrong? I was fired, I said, setting my bag down slowly. Neither of them spoke right away. Eduardo wiped his hands with a cloth. When last night? Email, no warning. They canceled my card. Lucia covered her mouth. After everything, Eduardo leaned against the table, jaw tight. Then there's no contract. I blinked. You're serious? I told you you were the deal, not them. He nodded toward the bag. Without your name? That paper is just paper. Lucia stepped closer. Where are you staying? I have enough for one. Maybe 2 more nights at the hotel. After that, I'll figure it out. They looked at each other briefly. No words, just the kind of silent exchange that only comes from years of partnership. Eduardo straightened. We have a guest room upstairs. I hesitated. You're not a guest, Lucia added. You're someone who kept your word. I followed them through the back staircase. The room was small, clean, a real bed, a folded blanket, a window that opened. No one's sending you home, Eduardo said as he handed me a towel. You decide what happens next. He left the door open behind him, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was surviving someone else's decision. I felt like I had one of my own. Eduardo placed his phone on the workbench, pressed the speaker icon, and dialed the number from the business card I had shown him the night before. Lucia stood beside him, arms crossed. I stayed behind them, quiet, unsure what this was going to sound like. The call rang once, then again, on the 3rd ring. Elliot answered. Eduardo, finally. I've been trying to reach you all morning. I know, Eduardo said calmly. Are we all set for the signing today? I assume Mary got everything in order. There will be no signing. Silence, but we are no longer proceeding with the agreement. More silence. Then Elliot's voice hardened. Is this about price? Because if you want to renegotiate, it is not about money. Lucia didn't move. Eduardo didn't blink. I'm sorry. I don't understand. This agreement is critical to our spring line. We're talking over $10 million in material orders. You can't just back out. We negotiated with her, Eduardo replied. Not with your company. Not with you. With Mary. That's an internal matter, Elliot snapped. She no longer works for us. Then we no longer work with you. You're making a huge mistake. This will ruin us. Eduardo didn't raise his voice. No. You did that when you discarded the one person who treated this partnership with respect. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then Elliot's tone shifted. Listen, I may have acted too quickly. I'm willing to talk through this. Maybe we can bring Mary back in. No, Eduardo said. You don't get to use her work after discarding her. That's not how this goes. She doesn't own the contract. Grayson and Holt does. Legally, perhaps, Eduardo replied. But ethically, she built it. You threw her out mid-process and expected no consequences. Now you're seeing one. Lucia reached over and ended the call before Elliot could respond. Eduardo turned to me unshaken. We'll find better people to work with. I didn't speak. I just stared at the phone. Elliot had always warned us we were replaceable, but now he knew what it meant to lose someone who wasn't. The message came through Eduardo. She wants to speak with you, he said, handing me his phone. Today, if possible, who E.A. Torres, director at Aurora, looks. I stared at the screen. The competitor you turned down. We've turned them down for over a year. Eduardo replied out of loyalty. But that's changed. Lucia appeared in the doorway. You should hear her out. So I did. I took the call in Eduardo's office with the door closed, hands shaking just enough to notice. A clear voice answered after the second ring. Mary Whitlow. Yes, this is Torres. Eduardo speaks very highly of you. I leaned back in the chair. That's kind of him. He said, you're the reason his team ever trusted Grayson and Holt. He's right. There was no pause. No pushback. We'd like to talk about your future, not a replacement role, not a lateral move, something better. I said nothing. You've already built a multi-million-dollar partnership. You understand suppliers, cultures, timelines, pressure. We don't want you to start over. We want you to lead. I'm not interested in another company where I disappear behind someone else's signature. Good, she said, because I want to offer you a pen of your own. I sat up straighter. You tell me what you need. Salary, travel structure, flexibility, everything. Start with what makes this work for your life. No one's ever asked me that. They should have. I glanced at the folded contract still sitting on Eduardo's desk. I have a daughter. I missed her birthday for a company that erased me in 4 sentences. Then let's build something that remembers who you are. Her voice wasn't urgent. It was calm, certain, like she wasn't recruiting me. She was correcting an oversight. I'll need to go home first. See my daughter. Take care of a few things. We'll wait. Issa said, send us your terms when you're ready. When I hung up, Eduardo was waiting in the hallway. He didn't ask how it went. He just nodded like he already knew. The first email came at 7:43 a.m. You have breached confidentiality. This is now a legal matter. By 8:15, there were 3 more. You have sabotaged the partnership intentionally. We will pursue damages. You no longer represent Grayson and Holt. I deleted all of them without opening the attachments. At 9, my phone lit up. Elliot Grayson. I let it ring. He called again, then again. By 10, I had 12 missed calls and a new subject line. You are destroying the company. At 11, the tone shifted. Mary, I overreacted. Let's talk. Another came minutes later. You're still valued. I'm willing to restructure your position, then come back. Name your price. I stared at that one for a while. The same man, who couldn't take 30 seconds to send me home safely, was now offering open-ended terms. Not because he valued me, but because he thought I could still save him. Eduardo walked past me in the hallway. Another one. I turned my phone so he could see the screen. He exhaled sharply. He thinks this is about money. Lucia appeared behind him, holding a steaming mug. He thinks everyone's price is printed on a line item. I stood there for a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I opened settings, blocked the number. Silence followed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. That afternoon, Eduardo handed me a copy of the contract, unsigned, unclaimed, unexecuted. I folded it neatly and placed it in my bag. It would never belong to them again. The airport exit doors slid open, and the Georgia air hit me like memory humid. Familiar, a little heavy with spring. Priya's car was already idling at the curb. I barely made it down the sidewalk before the back door flew open. Ivy ran straight into me, arms out, backpack bouncing behind her. Mommy. I dropped the duffel bag and caught her midair. She wrapped herself around me like a question I didn't want to answer. I held her tighter than I should have. Priya stepped out and opened the trunk. She's been asking for you every morning. I know. She made me check the flight number 3 times. Ivy pulled back just enough to look at my face. You came back. I did. For how long? I crouched to her level, brushing the hair out of her eyes, long enough to make up for everything I missed. Her lip trembled. You said you'd be home for my birthday. I nodded. I broke that promise. She leaned into my shoulder again. Are you staying this time? I didn't answer right away. I looked over at Priya, who stood by the trunk, watching quietly. Then I turned back to Ivy. Yes. No more halfway lives. She didn't say anything after that. She just took my hand and led me to the car like she wasn't willing to let go again. Priya handed me a folded piece of paper. Ivy's class schedule, dance practice, field trip slips, the things I had missed while convincing myself work couldn't wait. You're here now, Priya said. That's what matters. We drove home with the windows cracked open and Ivy humming in the back seat. She didn't ask about Buenos Aires. She didn't ask about Elliot Grayson or leather contracts or what came next. She only asked one thing as we turned onto our street. Can I sleep in your bed tonight? You never have to ask. The first message came from a supplier in Thailand. Is it true you're no longer with Grayson and Holt? I responded with one sentence. Correct. By the end of the week, I had received 7 more messages. 2 from Peru, 1 from Morocco, 1 from Portugal. The rest scattered across Eastern Europe. Each note said the same thing in different ways. We are reconsidering our relationship with Grayson and Hall. I didn't encourage it. I didn't need to. When I checked the industry alerts the following Monday, the headline read, Grayson and Hall faces multi-million-dollar supplier exodus ahead of spring season. I scrolled past the article, paused only when I reached the quote from Elliot. It's been a miscommunication. We're taking swift action to rebuild trust. That was a lie. There had been no miscommunication. They had fired the one person who held the line between respect and collapse. 2 weeks later, another alert. CEO Elliot Grayson steps down amid operational crisis. I set my phone down and went back to Evie's lunchbox. She wanted strawberries and peanut butter crackers, not headlines. Still, the pass kept knocking. Lucia called from Buenos Aires. Did you see it? She asked. I did. They're trying to patch the contract. Someone else from their team reached out. I didn't respond. We didn't answer, she added. They waited too long. That night, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in weeks. Inside was the original Reyes contract. My signature on page 6, unused, untouched. They had laughed when I asked for family leave last fall, told me Q4 was too important for vacations, suggested I bring Ivy to the office if I needed childcare. Now, the office didn't exist, and I was home helping Yvevi with a science project that involved glitter, baking soda, and a plastic volcano. The mountain erupted across the kitchen table. Ivy squealed. I wiped foam off her chin and smiled. Grayson and Hall had everything until they had nothing, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. The glass door clicked shut behind me. Frosted lettering across the front read, Aurora Lux, Global Sourcing Division, Savannah Office. Underneath that, Mary Witt, Head of Global Partnerships. I walked the perimeter of the office slowly, coffee in one hand, badge still clipped to my collar from the ribbon cutting half an hour ago. It wasn't a massive space, just 3 offices, a conference room, and a view of the Savannah Harbor that looked different now than it had when I used to stare at it from the Grayson and Holt Annex building. Back then, I was invisible. Now, a car pulled up across the street, and a young woman in a tailored black suit stepped out. She was early. I liked that. Our first regional supplier meeting was scheduled for 9 COD. I unlocked the front door before she even knocked. Morning, she said, extending a hand. Tessa Bloom, Brazil Textiles. Mary Witt, come in. She glanced around. It's rare to see a sourcing head work out of the South. Most companies stay coastal New York, LA. Coasts are easy, I replied. Here takes effort, she smiled. You built this fast. No, I corrected. I built it right. Tessa sat across from me in the small conference room as I laid out the onboarding documents. Behind her, sunlight touched the framed world map I had chosen myself. I've worked with firms where I never even met the person approving the contracts. She said that won't happen here. If I work with someone, I know their name, their history, how they take their coffee. She tilted her head. Do you, Eduardo Reyes, drinks mate? No sugar. His wife, Lucia, prefers espresso. Bitter. Tessa laughed. All right. Noted. We shook hands after an hour. Her deal would bring in over $200,000 of sustainable fabric annually. But more importantly, she said thank you on her way out. Not in a rushed way, not as a reflex. She meant it. I stood at the window once more as her car pulled away. I hadn't torched the ruins of Grayson and Hall. I didn't need to. I had built something better. And this time, I made sure I could never be erased from it. He fired me. I just let the consequences clock.